You've already heard many times, I'm sure, about Ann's and my introduction to the Demarest Methodist Church. In August of 1960, newly married, recently settled in Closter in our first apartment and dressed in our Sunday best, we presented ourselves promptly at 11 o'clock Sunday morning at the doors of the spanking new Methodist Church in Demarest. Unfortunately, the service had been started at 10 o'clock, so we were greeted by 200 or so exiting homeward bound parishioners. But we were ushered onto the patio where we were greeted with cool drinks by Randy Dallacher. The very next day, we received a visit in our apartment from the Demarest Methodist minister, Dave Follansby. Though David turned out had a secret recruiting weapon. One of the members, Art Stewart, was an executive with AT&T, and he would give Dave names and numbers of all the new people entering the Northern Valley. The conference proposed a religious census for the towns north of Demarest, and Dave told them, don't bother, they're all coming here. And they were. But Dave was not dependent on Art. My story is that when Blaise and Marion LeVay moved into Demarest, a young man out for a stroll walked by their house and saw them unloading the moving van and asked if he could help. Later, after everything had been put in place, Blaise asked the stranger what he did for a living. And the answer was, I'm the minister of the Methodist Church. This is why we had 2 new members, 2 new adult members, and 5 new children in our church family. Blaise was an ordained Reformed church minister. After serving as a missionary in India, he had just taken a position with the American Bible Society in New York. Marion, his wife and equal partner, were very active. She was an MD, by the way. Were very active in new additions to our church family. Got to get this where I can read it. Okay. For many years, until Blaise decided to go back into the ministry, the active ministry, and they were here for many years before they moved to Florida. Later, five evenings later, we had a visit from 2 church laymen, Art Skews and John Ritchie. They were members of the fishermen whose task was to visit newcomers and invite them in. Well, we never looked back. John was what I'll call difficult. He was uncomfortable with nearly anything new that was proposed to be done at the church. When Bob Grant introduced intinction to our communions, John wrote the bishop. It says in the Bible that Jesus gave the disciples the bread and then he gave them the wine. He didn't give them together. The bishop responded, "You may have a point." Frustrated as he often was, John loved the church to his dying day. Now, Art and Moss Hughes were teachers. He later became a superintendent of schools. But they lived their early life together clandestinely because the school rules forbade faculty marriages. The rule eventually changed, and so they were able to come out of the closet for the last several decades of their married life. They were both active, very active members of the congregation. Art liked to tell a story about greeting at the front door. A new couple or a couple came in whose last name he couldn't remember. So to hide his embarrassment, he asked, "And how do you spell your last name?" The answer was Smith. Maud was very active at one time. She was the church historian, which we know is a very important job, don't we? My first encounter with Adam Zahn was at my very first official board meeting. Adam, as the treasurer of the building fund, was reporting having moved multiple and various amounts of money from here to there to gain advantage. I sat there quietly, feeling like the country bumpkin that I had recently been. But I later learned that Adam was the vice president of a major bank. I also discovered that he was a warm and personable friend. He was our first okay, yes, he was also our first Demarest mayor. Think of it. Dot, his wife, alerted Anne to the opening of the school nurse teacher position at the Tenafly schools, which she was for the next 15 years, 25 years. Okay. Adam was, in many respects, the man who made this church come into being, but it was Bud Sherman who told us why. In the early years, we hosted student ministers, mostly from Drew, who were on their way toward ordination. One time, though, we had 3 student ministers from Union Theological Seminary in New York. They were all very good, but they were also full of advanced ideas of what churches could and should do. They thought, for instance, that pews were obsolete. We should sell the pews and set up folding chairs in a circle around the leader. Use that money to feed the hungry and house the homeless. At one meeting of the Methodist men, they made their point. What would happen if we sold this building? They asked. What if we weren't tied down with a mortgage, maintenance and utilities? The answer came from the back of the room. It was Bud Sherman. Said, "We'd probably get together and say we need a place to meet." John Ross, a charter member of the Poster Medical Group, was a loyal and regular attender at Sunday services. His wife was not, but she came to special events. Dr. Ross was the church's unofficial pediatrician. He treated many church family, including ours. We could always count on him for sound advice and gentle reassurance. He made house calls. It happened that nearly all of our early parenthood crises occurred when he was not on call. Many of them were mishandled, but he always got things straight and with good results. He didn't have time for many non-Sundays activities, but he did come by once to examine the building as it was being put up. It was dark and he fell into a ditch and broke his leg. He didn't sue. I was once one of a trio of church men who jointly owned the church's ping pong table. The others were George Ewald and Wes Bryant. Both George and Wes were southpaws, interestingly enough, and they were also among the most active and dedicated church members. But none of us had ever played against Cal Skinner, who undoubtedly would have trounced any or all of us. Cal once recalled to me an experience he had on a business trip. His hotel, he discovered, had a ping pong table. So come evening, he took the trusty paddle, which he always carried with him, to survey the scene. A young stud there was challenging and beating all comers. Eventually, he spotted Cal and called out, "Hey, Pops, how about or something like that. How about a game?" In one sentence and a half, he had committed two cardinal errors. The first was Pops. The second was have won a match. Now advice. When an unknown person appears at your hotel's ping pong table brandishing his very own paddle, do not assume that said man will be an easy touch. After the game, won by the Young Turk 21-18, Pops innocently suggested, "How about playing for money?" The young guy readily agreed, thus making a third and most egregious error. The score of the return match was 21-3 in favor of Pops. Not exactly what you were likely to call saintly behavior, but oh, so satisfying. If you look in your hymnals, you may find one dedicated to Cal, by Cal and his wife, to her mother. It's over in that section over there. But you're more likely to find a hymnal from Ed and Mabel Ranges. To celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, they made a gift of 50 hymnals to the church. Ed was the longtime scoutmaster of the Boy Scout troop that our church sponsored. When the Ranges retired and were saying their goodbyes, I challenged the church to identify which of the 12 elements of the Boy Scout law applied to them. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Okay. We chose all 12. Ed's needlework still graces the old library, our meeting room. Okay. We have had many organists over the years, some very good, some not so good, some indifferent. John Marino was one of our church's longest lasting employees. John's versatility and creativity expanded our musical sensibilities, and his generosity of spirit and cheerful demeanor helped make us better people. He became one of us, except of course, he was so much better a musician. Bill Moss served as a lay leader for a time, but he's probably best remembered as a member of the choir. Before her premature death, his first wife, Dot, also a school nurse, was one of Ann's best friends. Dot and Bill belonged to a sister quiet supper group that often joined with ours for camping excursions and holiday events. Bill grew up a Brooklyn Methodist, and he took great pride in both heritages. He was one of the devastated fans abandoned by the Dodgers when they scurrilously skipped down. My favorite single story of Bill came at a special birthday party, a gala baseball themed event held in our church's social hall. Sandy, his second wife, had a dilemma on her hands, how to get Bill to the party. Anne suggested that since my birthday was 2 weeks before his, why not tell him that it was a birthday party for me? The trap was set. Bill called Anne to ask what to get me for a birthday gift. She suggested a Mets cap, which he duly bought. When he came, I was at the door when he and Sandy came for my party. When he saw me, he was, to say the least, flabbergasted until it dawned on him that he had been had. The look on his face is one that I'll always cherish. At his funeral, I said he was like the Bill in Jerome Kern's song, an ordinary guy, but that our Bill was an extraordinary, ordinary guy. Okay. And Anne and I have spent virtually our entire married life, all but 2 years of it, 62 years and counting, in the embrace of our United Methodist Church Demarest family. We've met and connected with countless interesting, friendly, caring people, some ordinary, some extraordinary. We are at home here. In a way, it's a little like Anne's and my honeymoon, still going with no end in sight. Thank you.